Dr. Mike Masiapato, to address us on the Easter festive operations. Thank you.
The Deputy Commissioner for Corporate Services, Madam Jane Tupana, the Deputy Commissioner for Operations, Major General David Chilembe, the Assistant Commissioners, as well as the Deputy Assistant Commissioners present, the entire border management community, members of the media, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. Let me start by appreciating members of the media for having honored our invitation to come and participate in this conversation. Ladies and gentlemen, we are gathered here today to table a report on the implementation of the Border Management Authority's 2024 Easter Plan, which ran for a period of 10 days from the 26th of March 2024 to the 4th of April 2024. We are presenting this report during this month of April, at which South Africa is celebrating 30 years since the dawn of democracy. As a country, the celebration in this milestone is prefaced under the theme 30th Years of Democracy, Partnership and Growth. In fact, it is from this thematic posture that the BMA remains aligned to the need for growth and the realization of effective partnership towards the implementation of robust border management initiatives. It is in this celebratory mode of the 20 years of democracy, coupled with 1-year anniversary of the Border Management Authority, that we are presented with an opportunity to reflect on the benefits of moving away from a multi-agency approach to an integrated border management platform under a single command and control. As the BMA, we remain committed to robustly confront the complex challenges associated with border management across all modalities, ranging from sea, land, and air. In the past year, the Border Management Authority successfully integrated all the functions, the staff complement, and the standard operating procedures from the 4 government departments into the BMA as a Schedule 3A public entity. This resulted in the full integration of all immigration specialists from the Department of Home Affairs, the agricultural biosecurity specialists from the Department of Agriculture, port health specialists from the National Department of Health, and environmental biosecurity specialists from the Department of Forestry, Fisheries, and the Environment. To this end, the BMA has taken full control of all immigration, health, agricultural, and environmental functions across all ports of entry, with the departments remaining responsible for policy and the development of legislation pertaining to these functions. However, the access control function across the ports of entry remain co-implemented between the border guards as well as members of the South African Police Services due to the capacity challenges confronting the Border Management Authority. Ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, please allow me to present the 2024 report of the BMA's implementation of the Easter Festive Plan, which ran for a period of 10 days. In this period, you will recall that we had extended operating hours at some of the critical ports which do not operate on a 24-hour basis. We also deployed additional 400 junior border guards at some of the critical land ports to assist in the critical role of sanitizing the border environment and ensure the uninterrupted facilitation of the legitimate movement of people and goods across all ports of entry. In the implementation of this plan, we collaborated and coordinated our efforts with a multiplicity of law enforcement authorities, such as the South African Police Service, the South African Revenue Service, the South African National Defence Force, the Cross-Border Road Transport Agency, and other various local traffic authorities across the country. For the first time in this Easter period, the BMA teams were joined by officials from the Department of Social Development in order to ensure the effective management in terms of the movement of children across our ports of entry. The implementation of this plan was fairly overseen by members of the Border Technical Committee, who are heads of entities as well as the Director Generals from the relevant government departments, as well as the Interministerial Consultative Committee on Border Management. On the movement of people, we facilitated about 1,136,250 travelers across our 71 ports of entry in the period of 10 days between Tuesday the 26th of March 2024 to Thursday the 4th of April 2024. Compared to the 2023 Easter period, where we reported having facilitated about 913,859 travelers, we noted an addition of 222,391 more travelers facilitated, registering a 24% increase in traveler volume in 2024. As the norm, OR Tambo International Airport, Libombo Port of Entry to Mozambique, as well as Beitbridge Port of Entry to Zimbabwe remained the top three ports which processed the majority of the travelers in terms of 528,042 travelers. In fact, OR Tambo facilitated the most travelers at 217,855, followed by Libombo at 157,069, and Beitbridge at 153,118 travelers. Further, we observed an increase in the number of holiday makers boarding cruise ships at Cape Town Harbour to various destinations. In facilitating the movements across all our modalities, we processed about 36,675 private vehicles, 1,893 minibus taxis, and about 1,309 buses. In terms of air travel, we processed over 2,621 aircrafts at our various international airports. For the sea modality, we processed about 252 vessels across our seaport, of which 119 were for crew changes through the off-port limit. This has to do with the facilitation of crew changes for vessels that have not docked at the port. During the implementation of this plan on the people movement, we deployed proactive preventative measures for the speedy detection of non-compliances on the set port protocols. For effective plan implementation, we also deployed all members of the respective port management committees in the respective ports of entry in order to ensure the realization of enhanced service delivery. Whilst facilitating the movement of people during the return leg of our plan, which was executed from the 1st to the 4th of April 2024, we had to deal with individuals attempting to subvert our processes. We had to deal with individuals attempting to subvert our processes and enter the country illegally. So in this period of 10 days, we were able to intercept around 3,841 individuals who were attempting to enter South Africa illegally. Out of this number of intercepted individuals, about 2,403 did not have any documents at all. About 1,019 were refused entry for being undesirable, and about 419 were found inadmissible to enter the country due to various reasons. The majority of those arrested without documents were intercepted at the vulnerable segments of the borderline. They were processed, declared undesirable for 5 years, and were deported. Most of the inadmissible individuals were found with invalid passports, fraudulent visas, or failed to produce relevant documents such as valid yellow fever certificates, especially for those traveling from yellow fever endemic countries. Incrementally, since the first deployment of the border guards, the BMA has managed to intercept and stop over 281,000 individuals who attempted to enter South Africa illegally. During the 2024 Easter period, we observed a reduction in the number of undocumented and/or unaccompanied minors arriving at our port of entry. Despite this positive observation, we, however, on Thursday, the 28th of March 2024, intercepted about 5 children at the Beitbridge port of entry. We handed them to the colleagues from the Department of Social Development who activated the social workers at Musina. They later engaged their Zimbabwean counterparts and processed the children back to Zimbabwe to be reconciled with their respective families. Another incident involving a child was at Grobler's Bridge port of entry, where a woman was attempting to exit South Africa to the Democratic Republic of Congo via Botswana. The supposed mother did not have a passport, but only carried an emergency travel document, which was issued by the Embassy of the Democratic Republic of Congo here in Pretoria. The child was completely undocumented. They were both handed over to the colleagues of the Department of Social Development, who processed and took them to the place of safety within the Limpopo province. Despite the reduction in the number of conveyancers ferrying illegal migrants, 8 penalties were issued to some bus companies found transporting illegal migrants in various ports of entry to the value of 270,000 rands. At this point, we would like to send a stern warning to all conveyancers to desist from transporting illegal migrants in and out of South Africa. On the protection of South Africa from agricultural and environmental biosecurity threats, we managed to intercept and deny entry of about 7 cargo consignments of meat worth about 9,294,551, which were destined for entering South Africa through the port of Cape Town due to non-compliance. Further, the border guards seized about 748 kgs of non-compliant regulated agricultural products at various ports of entry. To this end, we need to emphasize that the importation and or exportation of plants and or animals and or their respective products is highly regulated and requires the requisite veterinary and or phytosanitary certification issued by the relevant government departments to be presented to border officials at the port of entry. In fact, the BMA is mandated to regulate the importation and exportation of agricultural products at the port of entry as guided by various pieces of legislation and international agreements. On the protection of South Africa from infectious and communicable diseases, the port health specialists continue to intensify their screening work across all ports of entry. To this end, the screening of travelers were conducted, including the execution of control measures for the management of cholera challenges. In this period of 10 days, our team of health specialists screened about 91,743 travelers across our ports of entry for various infectious and or communicable diseases. In their law enforcement work, the health specialists seized about in this period of 10 days, our team of health specialists screened about 91,743 travelers across our ports of entry for various infectious and or communicable diseases. In their law enforcement work, the health specialists seized about 120 tablets, 57,658 mg of medication, 59,530 ml of cosmetics, and about 50 insulin injections, which were destined to illegally enter South Africa. The seized products were handed over to the relevant authorities for their further processing and subsequent destruction. On general law enforcement matters, the border guards, working with other law enforcement authorities, continue to safeguard the South African communities by intercepting prohibited items and arresting those involved in cross-border crimes. This is done through the rigorous inspection and searches of personal luggages, light vehicles, and other conveyances, including trucks. During this Easter period, the border guards, working with members of the SAPS, arrested about 143 individuals for committing various types of crimes and transgressions within the port of entry and the border law enforcement area. The majority of these individuals served as facilitators of illegal activities around the port of entry and were therefore charged for aiding and abetting. Interestingly, one individual was arrested at Libombo port of entry to Mozambique while in possession of 13 passports, attempting to bribe an immigration specialist with some banknotes which were placed in between the pages of the individual passports. Further, about 641 kg of dacha to the value of 2,602,500 was seized and destroyed in both Groblersdal Bridge port of entry to Botswana as well as Caledonspoort port of entry to Lesotho. Another joint law enforcement operation by officials of the South African Police Services, South African Revenue Authority, as well as the Border Management Authority intercepted about 217 master cases of counterfeit cigarettes with the value of 3,351,690 at the Libombo port of entry from Mozambique en route to South Africa. These cases of cigarettes were found hidden in the tomato crates in a covered false compartment on a truck. Other interceptions include 573 items of counterfeit alcohol, 272 pairs of counterfeit clothing, as well as parts of a Toyota Hilux 4x4 worth 150,000. Regarding the BMA's contribution to tourism in South Africa, on the 27th of March 2024, the port of Saldanha for the first time received a cruise liner named Silver Cloud from Nassau in the Bahamas, carrying about 227 passengers who were successfully processed by our immigration specialist to enter South Africa and explore our west coast as an emerging tourist attraction. Further, on the 12th of April 2024, the Port of Cape Town received and processed a number of passengers from some of the biggest international cruise liners, being the Queen Victoria, which had about 1,808 passengers and 974 crew members, as well as Queen Elizabeth II, which had about 2,340 passengers and 1,241 crew members. All travelers and crew members were processed accordingly without any kind of glitch. In fact, it should be mentioned that was the first time ever that the Port of Cape Town had to host both Queen cruise liners at the same time. Considering the critical success factors, we would like to indicate that the success of this Easter operation can be attributed to the consistent implementation of all proactive measures, and those include effective corridor management, which was done with full collaboration with the respective local traffic authorities. As such, none of our key arteries leading to any of the land ports of entry experience any kind of congestion. Therefore, we would like to appreciate all motorists for observing the traffic laws and adhering to the instruction of the traffic authorities. Further credit can be attributed to the seamless processing of all travelers within the port of entry, coupled with the effective implementation of intensive joint operations with other law enforcement authorities, including sustained collaboration with our immediate neighboring countries. Additionally, the implementation of well-planned joint law enforcement operations between the South African authorities and our Zimbabwean counterpart led to the destruction of a well-constructed bridge across the Limpopo River, which was used for the smuggling of illicit goods between the two countries. Further work continues to be done with members of the South African National Defence Force to identify emerging vulnerable segments at the borderline, which requires the static deployment of the border guards to curb the spread of illegal migration. With the intensification of law enforcement operations at the various ports, we have noted the reduction in the movement of illegal migrants at the country's port environment. However, we remain vigilant as we continue to deal with this scourge of illegal migration into South Africa. In conclusion, we would like to applaud our team at Stockport Port of Entry for processing and competently recording the requisite data of all passengers who were on a bus, which was from Botswana en route to Muria in Limpopo province for the Easter pilgrimage. We appreciate their speedy retrieval and submission of the passenger manifest data to the Limpopo Departments of Transport as well as the Department of Health, as they required that information to assist them in the identification of the victims. As the Border Management Authority, we had conveyed our condolences to the families of the deceased, and the government of Botswana. Lastly, despite our limited resources, our officers continue to work tirelessly to ensure the smooth flow of legitimate travelers whilst upholding the highest security standards. We are extremely proud and appreciate all of the resilience of our border officials in rendering a stable service in very difficult conditions. As we continue to do this work, we do believe that South Africa would rally behind us and assist us to improve on our capacity and enroll requisite technologies required for effective border management. We thank you.
Well, thank you, Commissioner, for that detailed report on the Easter operations. Now it is time for our question and answer sessions with the media. And I would like to start with the media that is here in the room. And following that, we'll take media that is participating on online platforms. And as it is protocol, we invite members of the media to first introduce themselves before they pose the question and indicate the media house that they are representing here. So I will start with the first round of questions with media here in the room. You can go ahead.
Commissioner, I just want to understand the deployment of the extra 400 junior guards that were on the ground. If you compare to last year, would you say that their presence, has made a huge difference in terms of ensuring that different ports of entry in South Africa are controlled?
Any other question? Ladies and gentlemen, I'm joined by Takalani Mokwebo, who's going to be taking us through the online questions. Takalani, is there any question? We don't have any questions. Okay. Commissioner?
No, thanks, Zola, for that question. Maybe let's just indicate that we always value more boots on the ground, and we always value additional capacity as the BMA, particularly in view of the nature of the work that we have to be doing. You will remember that we had fairly been having 200 border guards that were recruited and launched on the 14th of July in 2022. That is fairly the contingent that we've been using all this while when it comes to border law enforcement in particular, both in the ports of entry but also in the vulnerable segments of the borderline. You will also note in the statement that we emphasize the point that when it comes to access control in the ports, we are still assisted as the Border Management Authority by members of the South African Police Services, fairly doing the work on our behalf, primarily because we do not as yet have the capacity. So to that extent, we want to indicate that additional capacity becomes critical for the Border Management Authority to be able to effect its legislative mandate. Therefore, last year around May or so, we then recruited the additional 400 border guards who have been at college, being trained throughout last year, and even now they are still at college. So what we had to do was to take them out of college for the 10 days of the festive period and get them to go get what we will call your experiential learning on the ground, and prepare them to say, as they graduate out of college, this is where they are going to do the work. Now, when we had the border guards on the ground, obviously they are not armed as yet because they are still to finalize certain aspects of the training. They are still to be appointed officially with all the requisite tools of trade that they need to have. So in this instance, we then deployed them on the ground to be able to capacitate the officers on the ground, and we had divided them into various teams, and they were working under very close supervision by the already existing border guards on the ground. Now, back to your question, did we see a difference? What we always appreciate without talking for ourselves is to also just get to have some feedback on the people that had encounter at the ports of entry. And they should be able to laterally speak independently as to whether they saw a difference or not. In terms of our experience, especially as the leadership of the Border Management Authority, we can confirm that the student border guards, junior border guards that we deployed had a very serious impact on the ground. I was at Beitbridge border post. I then moved into Groblers's Bridge, port of entry to Botswana. I then moved to Stockport, port of entry, also to Botswana in Limpopo. And I can assure you that the nature of the work that the junior border guards were doing, when we talk about 38,000 interceptions that we have done, 3,800 interceptions that we have done, just in the 10 days, that is a further demonstration of the work that the junior border guards had been doing together with the rest of the other teams that are on the ground. If you are to remember, one of our biggest complaint or our biggest worry is the issue of having a border environment not completely sanitized, where you have an incident where you have some fellows inside the port who are fairly roving and unaccounted for. Part of the immediate mandate we have given to the junior border guards when they get to the ports was to make sure that they completely sanitize the port. And part of their targeted individuals was those people who are facilitating illegal activities. That is why in the statement again we indicate the arrest of 143 individuals who are actually facilitators of illegal activities in the ports of entry, as it were. And by the way, Zola, one thing we did not put in the statement is that there were also 2 women who were actually intercepted inside the port, Bain from Zimbabwe in Beitbridge, who were actually found carrying fake stamps and who were fairly doing those illegal activities of stamping people's passports illegally. So they had really done a very great work. We actually even are to still have a feedback session with them at the college in terms of understanding their experiences and all of that. What we can confirm is that they will be graduating just in the next month, and then after graduating they will be full-time on the ground. And we do believe that with them on the ground we will further have more impact. There is a particular port in Lesotho where there has been a place called Batama, where people had literally just been walking through into the country. The port of entry is General? The Sun Press? Oh, Tasha's Neck. So we had issues where people were literally just overwhelming the presence on the ground. But with the junior border guards on the ground, that place was completely closed and there were no such kind of movements. Now, your obvious question is going to be, what happens now because they're back to college? So what we can indicate is that still we continue to work with the rest of the other law enforcement authorities. They continue to help us with capacitating us in doing the border law enforcement work. And to that extent, we will continue doing what we can. But of course, like I said, they will be getting out of college in the next month. And once they are out, they will definitely go to the ground full time. We further believe that as we go into the future, there will be a way of possible kind of financials being availed to the BMA to at least have additional other border guards to assist us into the ground. We know that in terms of technology, we have already done some procurements of drones via AMSCO, the procurement of some, your body cams, and a lot of other things that are supposed to help us to do the work better. So on that front, we are kind of covered. But the issue is about additional capacity in terms of boots on the ground. And we do believe that as we go forward, especially when we start to demonstrate the criticality and the benefits of having integrated this work under a single command and control under the Border Management Authority, one way or the other, we will have some bit of traction in the value chain and get some bit of capacity as we go forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. There's another question from Zola again.
Zora Sholana again from Newsroom Africa. Commissioner, there must be a reason why certain illegal immigrants, feel confident that they can cross our borders, as they please. Perhaps you can just, when you respond to this one, and just speak about how the BMA, can ensure South Africans that we will not be seen as a country that has porous borders, because I was going through your page where some people were just commenting saying that we own Bay Bridge. Is it an issue of, officials that are working together with these people that are conducting these illegal activities, or it's the fact that we are not doing enough in terms, in terms of visibility in our borders?
Okay, thank you for that. Takalani, are there any questions online? Nothing.
Yeah, you see, I think, Zola, one of the things that we had observed as the Border Management Authority is that the Twitter environment is very much complicated. It is very much complicated because there are some individuals in the Twitter space who are engaged in a psychological warfare. We are fairly aware that there are individuals who have fairly created some few accounts. Not that those accounts are having like 10 accounts under one particular individual. And part of the agenda that they are pushing in the Twitter space is to do as much as possible, firstly to discourage South Africans to have some bit of trust on the BMA, but also to throw some statement of discouragement in a way And that is one thing that we've observed. You are very much right. If you were to go to our page, you will definitely see those kind of issues. And I can also just say this point, which is very much public news, Zola, is that the unfortunate problematic, people even in that context, it is mainly Beitbridge based people, if we can be very practical. If you can look at the kind of work that we have done in most of our ports with Lesotho, whether it's Maseru Bridge, whether it's Fixberg, or whether it's Caledon Sport, you will then get to realize that the nature of the contribution we are making that site is very much visible. And there is no any intentional pushback, as it were. And that is why we also kind of appreciated the effort of the Minister of Home Affairs, Dr. Mtswaledi, having kind of convinced his counterpart in Lesotho to actually sign a returns agreement, meaning that if we intercept people that are not Basotho but at the border with Lesotho, we deport them back to Lesotho, and Lesotho will then have to deport them at their cost. So that kind of an arrangement is very critical for governments, because it means that Lesotho also takes some kind of responsibility to help us to deal with issues of illegal migration. If you are to look at Libombo, by the way, to Mozambique, which is the second biggest generator of illegal migration, there is some bit of effort. I'm not saying there is a zero entry, illegal one. We keep on fighting, but we are able to see some traction. The biggest challenge that we have is with our northern border, as it were. And I suppose that is exactly where you are raising this point. Now, I have indicated earlier that we actually found people that actually had fake stamps, and we got them arrested. And we said these ones are not being deported. They are actually arrested, get taken to the police, and they have to go through a process. Because if you basically just do basic deportation, they still continue with those illegal acts. That is why now we have changed the approach. We fairly deport those that are just breaking immigration laws, but those who are involved in criminal activities, whether it's aiding and abetting or doing fraudulent activity of stamping people's passports fraudulently and get paid for it, we effectively get those people arrested for real. Now, your biggest question is about, maybe these people are saying this because they know already they are working with our officials. So one thing that I cannot, and I suppose the entire leadership of the BMA cannot even say completely, that we do not have people who are still involved in those kind of activities. We are fairly understanding that that is a reality that we are dealing with. Now, the proper solution of that, for now, we are doing a lot of other things. I think you will fairly be aware that we just met with Advocate Mtivi of the Special Investigating Unit, and we have created what is called Border Management and Immigration Counter Corruption Forum. And that particular initiative, what we seek to do is to make sure that we create platforms where people are going to be reporting corrupt tendencies done by our officials. In that manner, we will then be able to activate the Special Investigating Unit to assist us to be able to track those in terms of your forensics, but also in terms of just basic checking people's lifestyles. All of those are things that we are putting together. By the way, we are also at a process of finalizing a program with the Commissioner of the Correctional Services, where they will be bringing some of the officials from Correctional Services who used to work in the environment, who are currently serving terms, whatever the years, 5 years, 10 years in prison, who must then be able to come and talk to their colleagues at the ports and say to them, do you know what? I used to be working here. I used to have a family. I used to have a salary. I used to have a house. I used to have a car. But unfortunately, I got arrested for taking 20 rand. And as we speak, I'm serving 5 years in prison and I've lost everything. So those are the programs that are underway. And by the way, that conversation had started with the team in Groblersdal Bridge, port of entry, as it were. These are all the initiatives we are doing. But the biggest one, and again, we are not there yet, is the delivery of body cams. I have said we have ordered them, over 2,000 of those. The intention, all our officers are to have body cams. What that means is every interaction that every of our official on any of the port is to have any conversation with anyone, that is going to be on both audio as well as on visual. And that particular body cam will be controlled off-site, not on the port itself. And to that extent, it means that we will be able to effectively pick up any conversation that is problematic between any of our officials and any of the traveler or any of the criminal fellow in whatever manner. We are not there yet, but that's where we are going. So we continually engage with our officials on the ground, do everything possible to discourage them from being involved in any of the criminal activities. Maybe let me also say this, colleagues, so that we also see some of the efforts that we are doing. One of the reasons why now we do what is called intensive access control into the port, with the intention to sanitize the port itself, is to also deal with corrupt tendencies. Because remember, if you only allow people with requisite documents who are legitimate travelers into the port of entry, and those become the only people who appear before an immigration specialist to be processed, you have already eliminated an element of corruption. Because nobody is going to pay anybody for anything if they do have everything that enables them to be able to travel. And that we consider it to be very much critical. And by the way, that is something that we have started intensifying. And of course, when it comes to having to deal with refugees as well as asylum seekers, the protocols are very much clear, and we also have that covered. But the key issue is sanitizing the port, contribute in making sure that we actually remove the facilitators who had been the people who had been doing some of these activities. Maybe lastly, we can give this example. On the 12th of November in 2021, you will remember we went into Libombo Port of Entry to Mozambique, together with the Minister of Home Affairs, together with the Hawks, as well as the team from Home Affairs, and part or among the people arrested who were facilitating illegal activities was actually a hawker, a very respectable madam who had fairly been selling things around the port area. And here basically we don't talk about sophisticated reality. We talk about basic reality. This person is just selling bananas there, oranges there and all. But that particular person, because ports were never sanitized, that particular person was actually found to be running a syndicate where people will then bring will bring passports in numbers. 500 passports, for example, bring them inside the port of entry, get those passports actually stamped as if the people exited the country, and be able to stamp them back as if the person came back into the country, and they were basically being paid 500 rands for each passport. You will know that syndicate has been taken down. And that is what we are talking about. So once you have a port where everybody actually just walk in, there are a lot of people who are walking in unaccounted for, all of these syndicates, and they are basic syndicates, by the way, not even sophisticated, doing all these activities. And we are doing all this work to make sure that we start to sanitize the space. And these things are, by the way, prevalent on big ports. In very small ports, like let's say Stockport, for example, Peka Bridge, for example, with Lesotho, you won't find such because the port is very much basic. It doesn't have, a bigger parameter, and there is not too much activities inside. But in big ports like your Beit Bridge, like your Maseru Bridge, like your Libombo, for example, those are the places where we find these challenges. And like I'm saying, we have started taking them down. And we do believe that as the travelers continue to work with us and make sure that they also don't get compromised, where some individual make them to present a passport to them and get it fraudulently stamped and actually pay 500 rands. That is actually a criminal activity. And maybe just to indicate this even to the travelers themselves, people must understand that if your passport is stamped to demonstrate you have exited the country, yet you haven't appeared before an immigration specialist, that movement is not recorded. in our biometric movement control system. And therefore, that particular movement is conceived movement. In real life, it is actually not a movement that would have taken place. And that is why people get in trouble when they participate in these things. Because when they now come officially to an immigration specialist, we get to realize that actually what is in their passport does not correspond with what is in the system, and they get in trouble. So we don't want people to be victims unnecessarily. People must come to the ports officially, and people must come to the designated spaces where they are supposed to be processed, either by the port health official, whether it is by the immigration specialist, or whether they are supposed to be presenting whatever that they are carrying in their luggages for inspection in terms of agricultural biosecurity issues, or even environmental ones. So to that extent, we should be able to deal with these issues and ultimately focus on facilitating the legitimate movement of persons, whilst these criminal activities are effectively subverted. Thanks.
Thank you for that, Commissioner. Are there any questions in the room or online?
Thank you, ma'am. A few questions from Shingrai Madondo, who is representing CAPS FM and the Voice of America Zimbabwe Service. And the question is, how many Zimbabweans are amongst the 281,000 illegal immigrants intercepted while trying to enter or leave South Africa? And please describe the relationship between South Africa and Botswana in angling against child and general human trafficking from Zimbabwe into South Africa via Botswana. And how many children are in places of safety in South Africa awaiting repatriation to Zimbabwe? Thanks.
Any other question? I invite Commissioner Van Niel, our Deputy Assistant Commissioner for Law Enforcement, to come and assist with this one.
Good morning, and thanks for the opportunity. The questions asked was first to respond to numbers out of the 281,000. And I would like to respond in the following manner, that the 280,000 obviously is a number that is across our ports of entry and across different nationalities. And unfortunately, I do not have the specific number for Zimbabweans here at the moment, but I think as I to some extent responded, because I also noted the question on the platform, is to suggest that if there is a deeper conversation around specifically Zimbabweans, we can assist in the number, and I would therefore avail ourselves as a Border Management Authority to get the specific numbers, but at the moment I do not have it with me. The second part of the question talks about specifically the number of children and trafficked individuals, mainly through Botswana into South Africa. And again, it's an area that as much as we are reporting on it, it is a fundamental responsibility of the Department of Social Development. And in terms of the numbers who are currently in their safe places, I think it is perhaps a little bit appropriate that the Department of Social Development should be the responsible entity responding to that questions. So unfortunately, I cannot give direct answers on those two questions, but I think on the verification of Zimbabweans on the 280,000, we can bring that in. Unfortunately, I don't have it with me now. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Commissioner Van Niel. Ladies and gentlemen, I think if there are no further questions to our leaders, I would like now to invite our Assistant Commissioner for Specialized Functions, Commissioner Medha Ramatuba, to come and deliver the thank you remarks.
Thank you, Program Director, Commissioner, Deputy Commissioners, and all the Deputy Assistant Commissioners, the members of the media, as well as the Border Management Authority officials that are here. I think my role is simple, is just to say, colleagues, on behalf of the BMA, we should thank you all for making time to come and spend this morning with us while you were supposed to be at your places of worship. I think as a BMA, we appreciate the fact that you are walking this path with us. You have been with us prior the establishment of the BMA. You have been with us as we host and conduct all the operations that we've been conducting. You have been assisting the BMA to communicate to the members of the public, to understand the facts around our existence and how we are operating on the ground. I think it's also important for us to thank the members of the public who are raising those issues on Twitter, because the more they talk about us, especially those that talk negatively about the BMA, it helps us to go back and look at what are the issues that we're leaving behind, which this country is expecting us to lead the country on. I think it goes without any need to emphasize the fact that ours is to make sure that we facilitate legitimate movement of people. And unfortunately, in the process of doing that, we intercept people who want to come into the country or out of the country illegally, and we intercept them. And that is what we seem to be getting good in doing. We therefore would like to wish all of you a very good Sunday. I think there is still time to go and join the worship teams. We can go and do that. But those that are traveling, please travel safely. We wish that as we invite you again, you will still come and join us so that you can help us to communicate the noble function that the BMA is running on behalf of the country. Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you. The media briefing is adjourned. Colleagues were sending us pictures. SABC. I'm just trying to check. Yeah, newsroom, it was live. Sorry, we're live now. We're live.
Thank you so much. Kashem,